I believe that music is an expression of the great dialectic, and the great dialectic is the aspect of the universe that our consciousness cannot perceive. There are always two competing aspects in the world, and we need to find harmony between these two, whether it be love and hate, whether it be heaven and earth, whether it be time and space. We have to find some sort of sublime unification. Music has a whole bunch of opposites which can be balanced. You could play high notes or low notes. You could play something that's loud or soft, something that's harsh or sounds ethereal. There's all these aspects that you can play with. And one of the great things that we have in music is simplicity and complexity. Now, for some reason, in our modern culture, in the sort of last period of Western European liberal culture, which is now under threat by a whole host of things that seems to be collapsing around our ears, there was an idea that simple was greater than complex. That simple things had more worth in a way. Why? Because they're authentic. It's a real expression of reality. Normal people can't handle complex things. They can't do complex things, and complex things come along. And complexity is a little bit elitist, isn't it? Complexity has to be appreciated by people who can deal with complexity, i.e. clever people, or people who can analyse things or know about the structures that they are appreciated. No, we can't have that. No, we can't have people appreciating stuff that only the elites can appreciate. We need something simple, punk rock, or some, rural blues musician singing about how bad his life is. That's what is really worthwhile in the world, not all this complexity. Now, of course, Bach, which is incredibly complex, that's great, but that was done in the olden days, and the olden days is a different thing. But anyone being complex now, it's just a hollow, masturbatory display of skill and has no artistic worth. Well, I'll tell you something, I quite like that about complexity. I always have done. I was always aesthetically interested in complexity from a little kid. Just was. I was interested in science when I was a kid. I was interested in how the world works. I was interested in entering a world. I was interested in truth, which I didn't understand, of being able to try and counteract my extreme anxiety I had by being able to focus not in the catastrophic thoughts that are in my head, but focus on something that existed in the world. And all this new age sort of meditation that wanted me to focus on a drone or some bloody whales bloody whistling wasn't enough. Now I needed something complex. It needed to go on about 20 minutes. Now I need to put the headphones on and close my eyes and follow the intricate tumbling of these counter voices and rhythms. And I wanted to feel that I was involved in something that was greater than myself. I love complexity. As a teenager, I went searching for it. The band that really opened my mind to complexity would be Yes. When I bought the Yes album, I realised that there was music out there in the rock genre, which I loved, which could become complex. Now, this is also something that young boys tend to like. I could do a whole video on that, but I'm not going to here. Suffice to say, I think there's something about, appreciating the skill level of a boy who is older than you, and girls can still have this. It's a boyish type of way of seeing the world, and so we can see sometimes complex music has been a little bit, trite and immature as well, I suppose. And as I've got older, I've become more appreciative of economy and that type of stuff. But I know there's a whole bunch of you out there that went, the top 10 complex tunes of all time. I've got to hear this. Now, of course, we now have, because of the internet, a plethora of math rock, Angine de Poitrine, complexity. It's all around us now. It doesn't take much to find the most complex music in the world, which is made even more confusing because the old digital technologies, as I point to my computer back there, They can do complexity to the cows come home. So you can manipulate some sort of less than complex stuff to sounding even more complex with the old digital technologies, can't you? And that's wrong, because we have to appreciate the Protestant worth ethic of somebody actually playing the complexity. Right, so this is a weird one. I'm opening this Pandora's box. I may do quite a few videos on complexity because I love it aesthetically. And sometimes I think there's something quite punk about complexity. There's something quite sticking your finger up to the audience to take them to a certain point and then go, right, we've left you behind. Can you hold on? We're going over here. Every track on here has that aspect. And many of these also have this sort of middle finger to the audience as well about it. I have come up with 10 extremely complex tunes that every musician should listen to. Is that a good title? No, because normal people should listen to them as well. That everyone should listen to. They all represent something. I'm sure I could get to the sort of back end of the modern. I've said all this bit, haven't I, about the modern math rock and andyedwardsdrums. I've done all that bit. So now, after 5 minutes of introduction, holding you here for a bit longer, those of you who are actually interested in what I'm going to say and don't just want to have the list of tracks and are hoping, if they click on very angrily into the description, why hasn't Andy put the list of tracks here? Because this is here for you, you fair weather fool. Spat on the bloody camera. I keep doing this recently. You fair weather fool. Right, this isn't for someone with a bloody attention span of a goldfish. We're talking about people who can deal with complexity. This bloody video is complex. My videos are complex. Right, they go on for a long time. You have to sit there and bring all the ideas together. There's something profound at the end of my videos. He said it in a very pretentious way, that you will only understand when you get to the back end of the video. He said with a slight, look on his face that in reality he just wanted people to stay there because they watch more adverts and it makes him more money. But he has, in a sort of postmodernist way, brought that up at the beginning of the video, and you might think that is interesting. There's another level going on here, and he's sort of self-referring to the sort of less than morally righteous reasons for doing a YouTube video. Maybe YouTubers don't have righteous reasons for maybe they just are chasing the views. Of course I am. But I also still have a love of complex tunes. And so I've had a lifetime, searching out complex tunes. I've got 10 here. If you want to freeze the frame of that, if you can understand it. It's also got 10 great rhythm sections. I have dropped my digital note taking. Do you know that? I have gone back to bloody analog note taking. I've got a school exercise book. It says YouTube ideas April 2026. I'm loving it with the old pen, writing stuff down, scribbling stuff out there. I'll give you another look again, didn't I? Right, shall we start off? Number 10. I always find it interesting when bands can pull off complexity while still having a sort of popular appeal, being able to sell out stadiums. Now, the best example of this is a band called Rush. That is an example of a band that is able to reach a wide audience while playing reasonably complex stuff. Rush. Rush aren't on this list. You know why? They ain't complex enough. They're just not. If you love complexity and you think Rush is the apex of complexity, bloody hell. Are you in for a shock if you start checking some of these tunes out? This is going to do your head in. But I thought I'd start with number 10, with another band which I think are more complex than Rush, that were doing complexity before Rush, that actually influenced Rush, and were able to sell out very large gigs, huge gigs. One of the biggest selling bands of the 1970s. They sold millions of records, and records that are unbelievably complex. This band is perhaps the most complex mainstream stadium-filling band in the history of popular music. And that band is Jethro Tull. Yeah, they don't get the credit for it. Now, we could say, when everyone else was making sidelong epics like bloody Yes, Close to the Edge, and Tarkus by ELP, that the virtuosity inherent in Jethro Tull was able to make a whole album-long epic and take the mickey out of itself at the same time, which is Thick as a Brick. Thick as a Brick is incredibly complex. And what did they do after that? They then went on to make Passion Play even more bloody complex. And so I find these albums difficult to listen to because they're so complex. A Rush track, you go, oh, that's in 7/8. I can get that. There's that run there. I understand that. I could probably get a Rush track down in a matter of an hour or something, even the most complex one. Jethro Tull, there's still tracks that baffle me to this day, and it's the track that I'm putting forth. It's one of their most sort of commercially appealing tracks. It's one of the most well-known ones. I love it. A lot of people love it. It's called Songs from the Wood. Yes, the title track off the album Songs from the Wood. It's only 5 minutes, but listen to what they pack into that 5 minutes. And I have to give credit to Barrymore Barlow yet again. Barrymore Barlow of the Progressive Rock Drummers was able to take a tune which was complex and without overplaying on it, play beats that would almost hide the complexity in a way that made it even more complex. It's something I got from Barrymore Barlow. If you're going into a section that's got 4 bars in 7/8, you could just play the 7/8. Or you might play the 7/8 in a different way of each bar. Maybe you're going to hint at something else that moves front, or you'll turn it upside down. Thus, taking the complexity and make it more complex. Now, with Songs from the Wood, I think the reason why Jethro Tull were able to get away with this is there is a certain complexity which is inherent in English folk music. It's the idea of the jig. If you listen to the Sidelong epic by Kate Bush on Hounds of Love, which is called is it the 9th wave or the 7th wave? At one point in that, the reason why that, which is a whole Sidelong epic or conceptual, the reason why it sounds really proggy is because there's a complex section in the middle where Kate gets a whole bunch of folk musicians as they go into this sort of multi-time signatures, complex line type of thing. The application of classical arrangement methods to that English aesthetic that comes from folk, the complexity within folk music, English folk music, Gaelic music, a certain sound is the arrangement of that across the band was brilliantly done by a number of progressive rock bands. Who would it be? Well, Gentle Giant for a start, who would divide the lines up almost mirroring each other. And Jethro Tull do this to a certain extent. The complexity of these lines shattering across the band from recorder to keyboard to guitar but to drums is quite astonishing. So yeah, I've got Songs from the Wood, and it's a nice little easy complex song to get you up and going with. So, go and check that one out. Now, I'm a drummer. And drum complexity, I could have put other music up that hasn't got drummers on. I nearly did. I nearly put the Tales of the Black Forest by Al Di Meola and Chick Corea off the Land of the Midnight Sun album. I nearly put that on, but thought, no, these have all got to have drummers on. Now, there was a benchmark set by drummers like Neil Peart and Barrymore Barlow in the 70s in terms of complexity. But in the 1980s, drum virtuosity raised up. There's a number of drummers that emerged. Omar Hakim would be one, Dave Weckl would be one. And then the daddy of all drummers, emerged Vinnie Colaiuta. And Vinnie Colaiuta in the early 90s brought out a solo album called Vinnie Colaiuta. And there was all sorts of bloody complex shenanigans going on in the drum department on that album. But towards the end of that album, there was a track where he plays along to sequencers. And the track is called Bruce Lee. And it tries to distill the spirit of Bruce Lee, the idea of striking like that was good, wasn't it? I don't know, striking like what's one of them snakes like that? Not an adder. What are they called? The ones that have the cobra. Striking like a cobra, which is the way Vinnie plays the drums, and it comes from Bruce Lee. But these lightning fast changes and shifts, and in terms of drum complexity, this is something else. I would not know how to even approach learning something so complex. So that's what I got at number 9 is the tune Bruce Lee off Vinnie Colaiuta's self-titled solo album. Check that one out. Right. Let's now up the ante a little bit. Punk. Punk's all about simplicity, isn't it? No, punk's a certain it's about freedom and expression. It's about the democratization of expression. Now, that can be going, you don't have to play these complex things, you just do something with 3 chords. But actually, when we start to look at punk rock and what comes out of punk rock, there is a complexity there which is being channeled in certain instances in a really strange way. I sometimes think bands like XTC come into this bracket. There's a complexity there, but also a freshness that came from punk. The band that seemed to embody both punk and extreme complexity would be Cardiacs. Now, I ummed and ahed on which tune to pick by the Cardiacs to represent complexity in this sort of punk, post-punk, weird otherworldness that the Cardiacs represent. I've decided to go for Res. Res in itself, in terms of the A-B verse chorus start that it opens up with, is still pretty complex. And it has an obtuse approach to phrasing, which only Tim Smith could do. Strange gaps that seem to upset you, right? That are disruptive, but you know that they're built on something which is true and strong, but you don't know what it is. And what you want when you watch the video for Res, which was obviously made in the 1980s using very primitive, video technology, there's a graininess there, and through this graininess we see these sort of clown-like people. But within there's a sort of strange Zappa-esque sort of Heath Robinson percussion coming in and decorating the complexity, which makes it sound even more complex. There's nothing like a bloody xylophone to make something sound complex. And the Cardiacs have that sound. But when we get to the middle section, we have something approaching the complexity of modern classical music. It's a genius example of the compositional brilliance of Tim Smith, as it weaves its way through so much complexity, and yet it's so compelling. Why is it compelling? Because there's another aesthetic there. The same way as Jethro Tull had the aesthetic of English folk music and the jig, this has its complexity rooted in almost like the circus. Now, they possibly got this sound from an American band called The Residents, and that is why this is called Res. There's a certain circus weird otherness in the complexity here, which comes from The Residents. It's the same aesthetic that Les Claypool took into Primus, who were also influenced by The Residents. Cardiac seemed to codify this in a very English way, then laying the groundworks for bands like Mr. Bungle, who would come out of sort of the grunge punk of America that produced Faith No More and Nirvana, but had a complexity which is rooted in this aesthetic. Now, I know the bass player of Napalm Death, Shane Embry, who's a huge Cardiacs fan, he introduced Mike Patton to Cardiacs. And so this type of complexity that we hear on this early track, this comes from very early on in Cardiacs, is a strange career. Res is incredible. We also have in that complex middle section an incredibly obtuse and yet beautiful guitar solo by Tim Smith, which seems to be being played on a Westone electric guitar, which used to be one of the guitars that you could buy from Kay's catalogue in the early 80s. In fact, my friend bought one and I inherited it at one point. And with that pretty cheap guitar, he plays this beautiful guitar solo in the Lydian mode, and because it's in the Lydian mode, it sounds a little bit like Frank Zappa. So a musician that is hanging over this list like the elephant in the room. Right, number 7, I thought I do need to represent math rock prog metal, and all that type of stuff. Is Andy going to put a Dream Theater track on? No, I'm not. It's not complex enough. But what I am going to do is put on a Planet X track. A track that blew my mind when I heard it is called Apocalypse 1470 BC. This has all the trappings of a cool progressive metal. And the thing is, if you go online and watch it, you'll be able to find live concerts of them playing it. And it's quite astonishing. Now, there's one version that Mike Portnoy plays, and he plays it greatly. But whatever Virgil Donati is doing on drums on his version, the proper version, I haven't got a clue. It's like the drums split in two, and the most fastest mind-bending sort of unison lines between bass and a distorted electric guitar and mirrored with the bass drums, is it? I haven't even got a clue what he's doing, whilst at the same time seem to hold down this like half-time groove. And it's so all over the place. We then have these insane keyboard solos taking their lead from Jan Hammer, but going into this sort of harmonic minor sort of Gustav Holst the Planets thing that prog metal often likes to go into. This, for me, when I heard it, was like a new level of complexity and woke me up to what the metal guys were doing at that point. This was something else. Now, of course, Virgil Donati on drums was not a metaler. He'd been doing this stuff right back in the early 90s. In fact, he'd made a name for himself in a Dream Theater tribute band. Virgil Donati, for me, is a drummer that in the 90s pushed drumming up to another level. He was the guy that then begat drummers like Mike Mangini and then later on Thomas Lang and Marco Miniman. And their drum skills, they were able to lift the complexity up to another level. There's a couple of Marco Miniman albums I've got where the complexity is just insane. But I am going to proffer this, which is a little bit, I would say, more concise than that stuff. Planet X Apocalypse 1470 BC. Go and check it out. You will be getting little glimpses of the complexity on this channel. I will edit in, a few seconds trying to get past the old YouTube bloody demonetization. So if you don't see anything, right, it's because they grabbed all the money and had to take it out. We'll see how we go. I might just put it up and take the bloody hit. Don't see why I should. Right, number 6. If you are into prog metal and you are into complexity, but you want to hear something else which is completely from another world, but is an exposition of that sort of complexity, a very important album. And I've played this album to prog metal fans and math rock fans, and they always love it. It is the album The Way Up by Pat Metheny. You can't put an album forth, Andy. It's got to be a track. All these are tracks. Now you're putting a whole album. The reason is because that album, which is an hour and 10 minutes long, contains just one track. And this is one track created for CD. So when you buy the CD, that track starts and an hour and 10 minutes it ends. And throughout that, Pat Metheny takes certain themes and certain ideas and he never lets up. There is no point in this where there's a 5-minute guitar solo just to fill the time up. The guitar solos emerge, but the guitar solos also emerge in this incredibly complex backing and they sort of weave and come out. So we have a band here having to negotiate one of the most complex tracks I've ever heard in terms of the density of material for such a long period of time, but also negotiate between improvised sections and written sections. It's quite astonishing. And Antonio Sanchez on drums having to negotiate what must be one of the most difficult charts in the history of drumming. All over the place this is. There's so much different stuff going on, and playing this live, how would you negotiate something like that? Which they did. Not only did they play it live, but they played it live and filmed it, and it's a DVD of it. You can watch the live version of it. It's astonishing. The Way Up is a landmark in complex music. You know, this is something else. Now, you could be saying, well, he missed out all, you know, Pierre Boulez, Varese, and all, you know, all Stravinsky made incredibly complex. I mean, they couldn't even count through the score of Rites of Spring when it came out. And this is all true. And I'm just ignoring that aspect. But it's a lot more simpler. You have a composer, they write the music down, you have a bunch of musicians trained to play that music with a conductor up, who will, you know, corral them like a bloody cowboy with a herd of cows, you know, or put a more English thing on a shepherd with his dog Shep, you know, with one of them whistles, you know. And that's designed to do this. The nature of a rock and roll band, having the drums in the background, having no real conductor, right, having electric instruments and sequencers and samplers and having to negotiate all the stuff that makes rock and roll hard to do, throw that into the mix and it's much more of an achievement. Many years ago, I got drafted in by a brass band, a championship section brass band, to play percussion on a 20-minute orchestral piece. I thought it would be unbelievably hard, and there was a lot of complexity there, but working with the score and knowing that's what the score was, actually, once it was learnt, it was relatively simple. There was nothing really hard to play, and it was just a lot of material and a lot of bar counting. But trying to do complexity with a band, you don't have the sort of rigorous structure on which to build the music. As a drummer, I could be seen as the conductor of the band. And so there's this precipice that you can fall off at any point in time. So I think this is why I'll be mentioning the drummer so much on this video. Right, so at number 5, I have the other prog band that is second to Jethro Tull. Never had the huge success, but did write stuff that was even more complex. Prog's prog band, Gentle Giant. Which one are we going to pick from? There's so many in their very sort of unique take on complexity. I am going to go with the tune Knots off the album Octopus. This starts with this strange a cappella and utilises a technique which I can't remember the name of on this video, but it's basically where you take a line and you distribute it through the band. So rather than doing that very sort of fusion-y prog thing where everyone's playing in unison exactly the same thing, you divide it up. It all moves around the band like that. And on this, they combine two approaches that they used to utilise. The band doing that, and them doing that vocally, and they even bring in some weird tune percussion at one point. Knots is about the psychological worldview of R.D. Laing, who made the point that there was no such thing as the insane. It was just a worldview that didn't conform to the rest of the world. Very interesting approach. And that sort of mental state where your brain can tie you into knots, this track seems to go into your head and tie your brain into a knot. It's not just complex, it throws you all over the place. And there is instances of sort of trickery rhythmically, where it seems to send you down one place, or you think this is going on, or some other aspects comes out. It's not just lots of notes that everyone's had to learn. So that's why I put it so high. Number 5, I have got Knots. The jazz rock fusion guys could be pretty complex. I think the guy that was probably the best example of complexity in jazz rock fusion would be Chick Corea. And I did go listing through my Return to Forever albums, you know, trying to think which one I would go for. But then I remembered the Electric Band. And the Electric Band made an album, I think it was called Inside Out, was it? I think it's their fourth album, wasn't it? The original lineup of the Electric Band: Chick Corea, Dave Weckl, John Patitucci, Frank Gambale. And on this album, it finishes up with a sort of very proggy, multi-parted tune, you know, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, called Tales of Daring. This is just what it sounds like when virtuoso jazz rock fusion musicians decide to play something complex. It's mind-warping. And Chick Corea is such an incredible composer, and he is able to balance a sort of winsome approach to melody, which is very light. He has a very light approach to complexity, but with a sort of aesthetic that comes from perhaps Bartok. And you put those two things together with a band which is guitar, bass, drums, keyboards, essentially, with a distorted guitar mirroring the lines that Eric Marianthel is playing on saxophone. So it has the sound of a sort of Spyro Gyra in its aesthetic. It's fascinating. This track is Tales of Daring is unbelievably complex, and nobody puts a foot wrong. God knows how they learnt this bloody piece. I mean, I know Frank Gambale said he wasn't a strong reader. Well, God knows how he negotiated his work. He had to learn this. This is something else. This is an example of jazz rock, an 80s jazz rock, at an unbelievably complex level. If you're a prog metaler, go and check it out. Now, it does have a little bit of the old 80s production on it, but put that aside and listen to what is going on. There's other tracks on this album that are pretty decks, but Tales of Daring, it never gets mentioned. You know, it's always got a match, isn't it, when it comes to Chick Corea's electric band. But this is probably, for me, the high point of that band. It's quite unbelievable. Right. What about Sidelong Epics, Andy? Sidelong Epics? What about Close to the Edge? Or Cygnus X1, the second one, My Rush off Hemispheres, that one? Well, I thought number 3 and number 2, that space has to be occupied by a Sidelong Epic. So I think I've come up with what I think are the most complex Sidelong Epics in the history of music. And at number 3, I have, by Hatfield and the North, Mumps. What? Never heard of this tune? Go and check it out. It's on an album called The Rotters Club. Now, it's not actually a sidelong epic. It's a sidelong epic long, but they've actually been able to squeeze a couple of tracks either side. And when you put that into the mix, it seems to make it even more complex. What is Mumps? Mumps is the greatest example of the Canterbury music aesthetic that I can think of. It's rooted right in this sort of Canterbury music aesthetic. It's all winsome and English, and it's all very eccentric and Heath Robinson, but they bring to this a level of virtuosity that you don't have in Yes or Genesis. And the lines, the compositional lines, they must have just been classically trained musicians, because this operates almost like a classical piece of music. The tunes are very tuneful. It's very accessible in its melodic qualities, but it's unbelievably complex, with sort of all sorts of unison lines and counterpoint occupying this tune, which is quite incredible. Little bits of improvisation here and there, winsome vocals, all sorts of things going on. Mumps, and it made my list of great Sidelong Epics when I did that video many years ago. I need to redo that. Mumps is something else. The Rotters Club was always one of my favourite progressive rock albums. And my journey towards the Canterbury scene, as I looked to egg another band that created incredibly complex tunes, and Caravan not so much, and Soft Machine, and to some extent Gong. For me, all those Canterbury bands, they've got National Health. Now, all of those never quite equaled what was going on Hatfield and the North's The Rotters Club. Their first album I don't know so well, and I haven't listened to it, and I think it's equally insane. So yes, that is what I've got at number 3. So now we get to number 2. Now, at number 1, we're going to have a discussion when we get to number 1. So at number 2, this has almost made my number 1 spot. I find this track just insane, and it's a band I haven't really mentioned on here, and I know there's going to be a very small but very excited group out there that have got Andy's actually mentioned them for the first time. The Rockin' Opposition Rio. I never go there, do I? Don't know enough about it, you see. I'm out of my depth once I go towards those bands. Bloody Slap Happy. Slap Happy? What's that about? Well, Slap Happy. this rocking opposition band. It's got 3 people in it. Dagmar Krause is an incredible singer that could be able. They seems to be able to sing anything in a very unique sort of German, Schreckstang, European-sounding voice. And then they got Peter Blegvand in there, who seems to be a giant. Have you ever seen the photographs of Slap Happy? I went on the internet for this video and put, how tall is Peter Blankpad? Is he still alive? Because I need to know how tall he is. You look at the photograph, is he a giant or are the two really small? Or is it a mixture between the two? I need to know. I know I put some frivolity in here as I mentioned the band Slap Happy, but it's not Slap Happy I am referring to. Slap Happy joined forces with another rocking opposition band called Henry Cow. And Henry Cow occupy that sort of countercultural, English Marxist approach to progressive rock, which I think they're the only real, Robert Wyatt, you could probably say as well. But their music's insane. Dark, modern, classical music for rock band, with Dagmar Krause singing all the way through, but not singing bloody songs, singing weird, revolutionary modern classical vocal lines. And what track have I gone for? The Sidelong, Living in the Heart of the Beast. And this track is so obviously, because the budgets were never there for Henry Cow. This track, what's the name of the album it's off? Oh, come on, Andy. It's the red one. They have a bloody sock, a sock being the end of your leg, you see, a leg end, That was their first album's called End. They use that across, and the red one is their greatest album. I want to say On Land and Sea, but I don't know if that's a Cardiac's album. You see, this is why I don't talk about Henry Cow. Do I like them? I bloody love them, but they're weird. It's hard to listen to. But for me, Living in the Heart of the Beast is just the most complex track ever created by any rock and roll band. Henry Cow get the title, but they're not number one, are they? Now, I know you all want us to go away and listen to this 20-long epic. Let's see how many of you get through it. This is bloody complex. But it's not number one. Why? Because it's obviously the king of complexity is, and he did it all. He sold millions of records, he had a cultural profile, but he also made some of the most complex music and was able to run his business where he could employ musicians that could not only play, but that could bring their own unique talents to it. There is no other musician that has ever produced a body of work in the history of 20th century music like this bloke. It is, of course, Frank Zappa. Of course, Frank Zappa is going to be getting at number one. So what's the track I'm going to pick? Well, probably his most complex piece could be Moe and Herb's Vacation. That's his most complex piece, I think. Which, again, is like a big slab of modern classical music. Sounds like that, Living in the Heart of the Beast. But Moe and Herb's Vacation is like a classical piece of music. Got no vocals in, all cut up to all the other sort of complex things that Zappa does. If we were going to go for that, maybe Gregory Peccary is pretty complex, but there's nothing in that is mind-warpingly hard to play. It's just very long. I think Ship Too Late to Save a Drowning Witch, that whole sign on side 2 of Ship Too Late to Save a Drowning Witch, is unbelievable. We could go to some of the orchestral favourites. We can maybe go and look through the Yellow Shark stuff. There's a whole host of incredibly complex tunes. And then we have Jazz Discharge Party Hats, where we have Zappa riffing in a sort of pastiche of jazz poetry about some groupies and their band members sniffing their pants, which is then given far too much artistic worth by getting Steve Vai to notate every cough, scratch, and every word of this monologue for guitar and acoustic guitar, and that I believe. It's an unbelievable display of virtuosity. My friend, the great guitarist Shannon Hanspel, has created a YouTube channel where he analyses what's going on. And the complexity, it isn't just random notes. There are ideas and theories in Zappa's complexity, which you could study, for the whole of your life. Shannon has done that. He's got a PhD in studying the complexity of Frank Zappa's tunes. Now, which tune am I going to go for? Well, I am going to go for The Black Page. And the reason why I'm going to go for The Black Page is it is bloody complex. I mean, listen to this.
That's complex, right? Now, that was me playing it, and it was me playing the easier version. And it is an easier version, but I was still having to play 11/4 in that piece. That's bloody complex. But the reason why I have made Black Page the number one on this list is it has become the poster boy. It's become the poster child. It's become the emblem of complexity. It's the touchstone of complexity. There is the Dream Theater Dance of Eternity, but it's not even got on my list. If I had to learn Dance of Eternity on drums, it's just a lot of stuff to learn. I could play it, I'm pretty sure. Most of the stuff on here I'm aware of, I wouldn't know where to start. The Black Page is emblematic of what we've been discussing on this channel. So that was my 10 greatest complex tunes ranked. And I hope it's given you all sorts of food for thought, and now you can go scurrying away, listen to these, and if you haven't heard any of these and they do shock you, I hope in the way that this video is intended to do, then stick it in the comments. Thank you all for watching it. Like and subscribe. Become a member over on my Patreon. Become a free member or a paid up member. I'm starting to edit some of my videos now, and some of especially the group ones, when we get in the room, I film the whole session. It's probably an hour and a half long. Then we edit that down to about 3/4 of an hour. We lose half of it, and I'm putting those full unedited sessions up online. So if you want to see the Soft Besieged session up online, or want to see my recent novelty video fully uncensored, I mean, that is uncensored because we were saying stuff that shouldn't be. It was so offensive. I'm only saying that to get you over there. So if you want to jump over to Patreon and see this uncensored stuff, some of it I also put on the membership section here. There's 2 sections here. There's the drummers membership, which is a little bit cheaper, and I tried at least once a week get either some example of me drumming, going through some ideas, and there are drum lessons on there, quite a few now. There's other original content for the members there. So, if you want to become a member there, that would be great. And if you want to support me so I can buy more equipment, you can see all the bloody equipment I've got. Most of this has been given to me. This Kronos keyboard that you might have seen popping up every now and then, that's not mine. Don't think I've gone and bought that. That's Rob's, that is. Right, so a lot of this stuff I've purloined or bloody bought second-hand, but I've just bought 2 beautiful Rode NT1s, not the top end of bloody large diaphragm microphones, but pretty good, and I'm going to be able to utilise those next. I'm looking at getting a very simple wired clip-on mic like they have the old days, and trying it with these cameras. That might improve the audio sound. So that is the next thing on the list, and I get that. I only allow myself to buy that out of the PayPal tip jar money. So if you want to put some money towards a clip-on microphone and improve the audio quality, then please do that. I'll be very grateful. Thank you very much for watching this video. I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.